Good evening and welcome. And tonight on the line, I am delighted to welcome David Couvillon. I hope I've said that right because I've already had lessons with about that on tonight's episode. But before I start talking to David, I'd just like to give a big shout out, of course, to our funders, the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Very happy to be here. Great.
So your book is titled "From U.S. Marine to Provincial Military Governor in Iraq." Not a obvious career move, as it were. But before we get to that and talk about your time in Iraq, how did you come to be in the U.S. Marines? What inspired you to join up?
Uh, when I was about 8 years old, I read a paperback trilogy. It was entitled "The War in the Pacific," World War II, and I was enthralled with the story. I wanted to be a Marine. It touched me. I uh, I felt that at that point, I wanted to be a Marine at some point, and amazingly enough, we were moving. My dad got another job, and we moved to another town, and we were going through some pictures. I was about 11 years old, and I always knew my dad. He was a high school coach, but he always wore a funny cap, and it never dawned to him. But I was looking at the pictures, and I recognized that it was actually a Marine Corps utility cover, which is a fatigue, their uniform for the field. And I asked him, and he told me he was a Marine, and I didn't know. So that just piqued me even more to learn about it. And then later, I felt that I wanted to be a Marine because I owed something to I felt I owed something to my country. It was thing. You have to remember at this time it was the time during the Vietnam War. At the end of the Vietnam War, uh, not a very popular thought for people to join the military at my age, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to prove that I was a man somehow, that I was capable of doing manly things. I should say.
Were you influenced by the Vietnam War?
Yes, this obviously I read a lot of books. Uh, One of the jobs as my dad as a teacher, he was on the committee that evaluated history and civics books for the Louisiana schools, public schools. And he would always get these textbooks and history books from publishers to evaluate. And so I first started reading because I would flip through the pictures of war books, and then I would then I'd read the captions, and I started reading the text. Then I started reading biographies and histories and other things like that. But then Vietnam was on television. It was on the nightly news almost all the time. And as I grew up, I knew people who had gone off to Vietnam, and I knew that the local veterans organizations, American Legion, VFW, these men uh, had served in World War II and Korea and now Vietnam were coming through, and I was having a discussion. These were the leaders in my community. These were my coaches for my sports teams. These were the teachers. These were the policemen. These were, sometimes the small politicians in the small towns, kind of thing. So these were people I looked up to. In the Vietnam War, I read more than just the anti-war rhetoric that was going on at the time. I read the background from World War II to the Cold War, Korea, the transition into Vietnam through Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and into Nixon, Johnson, and into Nixon. And then why we there, and what was the political background for that? And I understood the domino theory, obviously, but I did understand that we were in a global war against communism and the way of the Western world, so to speak. And um, I guess I can say I'm a patriot. I'm patriotic. I really wanted to be able to serve my country, and if that was the opportunity, and if joining the military was part of it, and I was going to go to Vietnam, I joined at the very tail end. I'm considered a Vietnam veteran, but I never did go to Vietnam. I was stateside at the very end. But it did have an influence on me, and it had an influence on me because uh, couple of things. One, how the Vietnam veterans were treated coming back from the war, and how people blamed the soldiers for what they were doing while they were fighting and trying to do what the government wanted them to do to maintain a government democratic or near democratic that was sympathetic to the United States and would block communism in Southeast Asia. And then, of course, all of the news things that came back, war atrocities, um, killing, uh, napalm and what that looked for, the famous photographs of Colonel Tin with the pistol to the prisoner's head, the young girl that had been, her clothes were burned off by napalm walking down the street. Everybody's familiar with these photographs, and it had an influence on me. Is that the way we operated? Did the U.S. military actually operate outside the laws of war? And by the way, there are no laws of war, only what people tend to agree with. There's no overarching thing that can force you to do that, other than if you lose, you could be tried under that and then punished for that. But there is really, the United Nations doesn't have an army. They're not going to come in and take over or punish you for that. It only happens within your own government, or whether you lose and they charge you criminally. But I wanted to be a patriot. I wanted to serve my country, and I was interested and fascinated with, one, the Marine Corps culture, two, military culture, and three, warfare in general, and how that had changed over the years. And Vietnam was the modern era of warfare. And I'll make another point. I know you study warfare too. You could have taken a Vietnam soldier, you could have taken a World War II soldier or Marine and dropped them into an American unit in the Vietnam. The weapons would have been familiar, the uniforms would have been familiar, the tactics would have been familiar. There was everything that you could work with now. If you try to do that now, if I would take a World War II soldier or Marine and drop them into a U.S. Army or a U.S. Marine Corps unit right now, they would be dumbfounded at the communications, the weapons, the capabilities, the logistics, the food, the even the science of how we fight war now. It's completely different over the change. What is it, 60, 70 years now? Hell, more than that. It's 20 years since Iraq, 30 since Desert Storm. My God. Yeah, long time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I couldn't disagree at all. So your career in the Marines, you did quite a while in the Corps. Just give me a potted history, not all 39 years, I think it is. Otherwise, we'll be here for
I,
quite a
uh,
while.
I, I joined out of high school. I enlisted. I enlisted on an open contract, which meant I went in and they would determine who I was and what I wanted to do, what job they would put me in. I do remember they asked me if I could type while I was in boot camp, and I raised my hand, and I'm pretty sure that's why I got selected to be a clerk initially. So I was a clerk typist initially for my first couple of years. I decided that wanted to go to the Naval Academy and be an officer. I applied for that. I kind of got jerked around by this major, and I got ticked off. So I got out after my first enlistment, and I went to school at Louisiana State University to get my degree. At that time, I was living with my mom, my brother, and my sister, my younger brother, younger sister. I wish I had another brother and another sister. So there were five siblings in my family, but two of them my daughter left home. My mom moved away for another job, and I ended up needing some extra money. I was basically supporting my younger brother and younger sister. So I joined the Marine Corps Reserve. I joined for two reasons. One, I needed extra money. Two, I really missed being a Marine. I found it was something I was good at. But at this point, when I joined the reserve, I had the opportunity to go into the infantry, and I became a mortarman. By this time, I was a sergeant. and eventually a staff sergeant, platoon sergeant. And the thing, well, I enjoyed being a reservist. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed working with other Marines. I decided I wanted to be an officer, and this story would take a long time, and we don't have time for that. But I will tell you, I went a route that had not been done since early in the Korean War. I got a direct commission. I did not go to normal officer candidate school. I didn't go to ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. I didn't go to PLC, Platoon Leaders Class. Thing. I basically took a correspondence course. I made my application. I had to have a college degree. I had to be at least a corporal. I had to agree to serve for 3 years. I had to have a general technical score of 120. I met all of this. I had to have a board of 7 officers interview me and recommend me to be an officer. I passed all that, went up the chain of command, and went all the way up to the commandant of the Marine Corps, and everybody going. Eventually, it got to a point where the adjutant for the Marine Corps said, "There's no program like this." I said, "Yes, sir." Remember, I told you I was a clerk, so I knew all of the books and the laws and orders and things. And I said, "Yes, sir. Look at Marine Corps Order P1060.1C, Frats, whatever it was." And he goes, "Oh, holy shit! Staff Sergeant, that this order is no longer in effect. Every order in the Marine Corps has a self-cancellation date, normally 2 years after the order is written, and then they re-up it every day." And having been a clerk, I was quite aware of this, but I looked at this and somebody had messed up. There was no cancellation date on this order, and the adjutant, full colonel, he goes, "Holy shit! There's no cancellation. This order's in place." So he brought it to the commandant of the Marine Corps and said, "Hey, this staff sergeant found this order, and he's fulfilled all the things." And he came back. He came back and told me, he says, "Commandant said, well, if he's got balls enough to apply for it, I got balls enough to give it to him." So I was a staff sergeant one day, a second lieutenant the next day. So that's how I became an officer. And they gave me my choice of what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be an infantry officer. So that's how I got it.
Wow, that is definitely a very unusual route. So let's fast
By
forward.
the way, they changed the order after that.
Yeah. Never again. Never again.
No.
So let's fast forward to 2003, when you're commanding officer of 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, and
Yes.
which is a reserve unit, isn't it? You're commanding a reserve battalion. So what was the makeup of the people in that battalion? Because this is going to be quite important for what happens once you get to Iraq, of course.
The reserve program in the United States, the joke is you serve 1 week in a month and 2 weeks during the summer. Well, it takes up a lot more time than that, because there are a lot of things that you have to do. I've always said a reservist, a Marine reservist, has to accomplish all of the training and requirements that an active duty Marine does over the course of a year. Requirements. A Marine reservist has 52 days to do it, and a active duty Marine has 365. But a reservist generally is someone who is in civilian life. He has a job, or she. They may be a student. They may be unemployed. But they generally have a job and a family. They're pursuing other things. They have their own hobbies that they do also. But then they have this obligation and requirement to conduct training and to augment that training that would augment the needs of the Marine Corps during time of war. Our particular battalion, 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, had 2 requirements. We were required to be amphibious specialists. Obviously, that would be ship to shore attacking across from land, from water to land and into inland. And then our secondary requirement for the battalion was to be desert warfare trained. Other battalions would be mountain warfare training, cold weather training, something else of that nature. Um, but my Marines came from a swath across the South. The headquarters of the battalion was located in New Orleans, Louisiana. Our heavy weapons company was located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had infantry companies in Little Rock, Arkansas, Memphis, Tennessee, and Montgomery, Alabama. So, of course, the southern part of the United States, and pretty much all Southern boys. Of course, there were city boys, New Orleans. But I mean, everything was located in a city, but you would generally draw from 50 miles around, maybe 75 miles around, to come into the unit for training during the weekends and the thing. Training during the weekend about once every quarter would be an administrative weekend where you were doing paperwork, physical fitness, weapons training, drills and that type of thing. And then the other times, the other 2 weekends during the quarter and the 2 weeks during the summer, you would do field training for exercises. We would go to a field, we would do live fire training, fire and maneuver, integration with aircraft, integration with other units, learning the basics of infantry tactics. So there would be your weapons qualifications, your heavy weapons qualifications, your cross training, and I made sure that all of my Marines were cross trained across all of the weapons that we had. My philosophy was brilliance in the basics, and that since we only had quote unquote 52 days, 57 days a year to train, we wanted to do the basic things that were required for us expertly. And if we could do that, then we could, if we were called up for active duty, we could move to the higher level, higher order things because we knew what to do so well. So shoot, move, communicate is what we needed to do all the time. And then we focused on patrolling. We focused on accuracy for our weapons. We focused on being able to work together and coordinate with each other. It's mostly like any kind of sports team that you're talking about, that when you train together and you work together, you know what the other guy is going to do. You anticipate him. You become very well versed with who he is and what he does, what his capabilities are, what his weaknesses are, how he moves, how he talks, what he's thinking when he's moving, and that kind of thing. So I try to do that. So, and I know I went a long way around your question, but back to what a reservist does, and we'll go back. A reservist has a different outlook than an active duty soldier or Marine, because a reservist, remember I tell you, he might be studying in school, so he's going to class, he's taking courses, he has obligations for that. He may be having to work his way through school and have a job. He may have a full-time job. He might be a tradesman. He might have a family. His kids are playing baseball or football or basketball, or his kids are in school. He's helping them with their homework. His wife is working. He has other obligations in the community. He may be a coach for them. He may be doing other things, but he's a civilian most of his time. And I'll tell you, I get back from a drill weekend, and I'm cussing up a storm during the weekend, and you're with the guys, and you're motherfuck this and holy shit that, and god damn it, get it done, and you're yelling at people and thing. And then I would go to work in an office environment, and I would have to change. I would have to switch. I would have to transition from a Marine to a civilian supervisor or leader or worker or something. It's a different mindset that you have to work with. And then next month, I would grow from that role back into the military role. Put your uniform on, get your head straight. Who you talking to? What are you doing? Yes, sir. No, yes, sir. No, sir. The orders of level of authority and what you're doing. And it's a mix, and it moves across like that. And some guys had it harder than others. Some guys took it hard to transition, particularly from the Thursday or Friday going into the weekend and not being lax in military discipline and customs and courtesies, and getting back into the role. not just saying, hey, Coo, how you doing? Good morning, sir. Nice to see you, sir. And then, snap to when it's time to come. There's a big difference, and a reservist brings that different level of mentality into that military role because uh, in his regular job or in his regular civilian world, he has much greater latitude in what he can do and what he can't do, and he has um, the thought that he can accomplish something if he puts his mind to it and thinks it. One of the things that I learned from my studies in World War II, they were asking what was the better fighter doing the regular infantryman, and universally it was almost always the German fighter. The British were very capable and professional. The French had a sort of elan. The Japanese were fanatical. The Russians were just pretty much meat fodder. Um, but the Germans pointed out that the Americans were different. The Americans had no problem um, doing something different than should have been done. They had no problem picking up enemy weapons and utilizing them. They had no problem thinking or working different thing. I think it was Rommel that famously said, uh, the Germans are professionals and Americans have great professional literature and books and rules, but they never follow their great literature, professions, and rules. They don't follow them, and they do things differently than anybody else. They adapt to the situation, and we'll work on it. And I think that when you look at World War II, it was mostly a drafted or volunteer army. It was not a professional army. The Americans brought people in from the civilian side of life, quickly trains them into being a soldiers and send them out into the battlefield. Well, that's almost pretty much what a reservist does. They pull out of civilian life, they train quickly, get the basics down, and then we pull the thing. You train that much more harder, and then you move into to warfare.
So when you were notified that you were going to Iraq, how did you feel about that in terms of the unit? Were you confident? You think you still had work to do? What were your initial thoughts about all of that?
We got to drop back a little bit. I took command of the battalion August of 2001. Uh, Now, you'll have to understand that I had been a member of this battalion since 1983, and this was 2001. So I'd been there 17 some odd years. And I knew a lot of the officers already. I'd already served as a company commander, an operations officer, the executive officer, training officer. I'd done a myriad of jobs in the battalion already, and I knew most of the officers. I knew most of the senior NCOs already. I already had a passing familiarity. I'd done many training operations with much of the same men. We had a symbiosis. And then, of course, in September 11th happened. This was only a month after I took command of the battalion. And I knew when I saw the second plane fly into the World Trade Center, I knew I was going to be taking my Marines to war. And the weight of that on my shoulders was different with it because now I was responsible for the training. I always was responsible for the training and welfare of my men, but I'm bringing them to. And anytime, any decision that I make, whether it is right or wrong, could cost the lives of my men or could cause failure uh, for my mission. That's a heavy burden. And then, of course, the United States went into Afghanistan, and we were initially slotted to go into Afghanistan, I think. But if you remember, the initial foray into Afghanistan only lasted a few days. It was very quick, and they stood us down. And so we went back into training, and I had gone to my Marines and said, there's still an opportunity that could happen. We could still go to war. We want to be brilliant in the basics, as I said previously. I want my Marines to be trained. I want all of our equipment and our logistics, our weapons, our training to be top notch. And I trained my guys hard. I made sure that we were intent about what we were doing. That we weren't playing at soldier or playing at Marine. I would say that I'm sure somebody would, in the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps preserved the thing, but we were considered a very good infantry battalion in the Marine. We'd gone through a number of Marine training exercises at 29 Palms, California, combined arms exercises, which is one of the greatest tests that Marine Corps units have to go through. And we came through with flying colors. We were recognized that we were very good at what we're doing. We were a good unit. We were a good battalion. So when it came time for Iraq, and I was notified we were going to Iraq, I passed the word out to. We got the word out to our Marines that we had to report for mobilization activation. Again, I was weighed down with the thought of the heavy responsibility that I was going to have for my Marines. I was well satisfied with the training of my Marines and what we had done. I had observed them. I'd been with them. I worked with them. However, we were being activated and told to report, and I was told that about 80% of my staff, the officers in my staff, so my S1, my S2, my S3, my intelligence officer, my admin officer, my operations officer, and my logistics officer, and my executive officer, I was told that they couldn't go with me, that they were overranked for their billet, that they would have to leave, and I would have to find new people for these billets. I was absolutely shaken because these are men. Matter of fact, of those 6 of them, 4 of them I had served with in Desert Storm together, so we were very a tight knit group, well versed in each other. Fortunately, I was able to secure the services of some other extremely fine officers and bring them on board, and we got them spun up. Several of them were active duty officers in the Marine Corps Reserve. You have a commanding officer and you have an inspector instructor. The inspector instructor is assigned by the Marine Corps, an active duty Marine, equivalent to the same rank as the commanding officer of the unit, so some company grade up. And he is the advisor to the unit commander. The reservist is the commander, but the inspector instructor is an expert in his field and an advisor, and he's the one between the weekend duties and the training. He's the one that keeps things together and that thing. Luckily, my inspector instructor was a fabulous individual. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Craig Timberlake. Craig finally retired as a major general in the active duty Marine Corps. Fabulous officer and a guy who helped me tremendously. But I was able to reach out and move other active duty officers, captains and majors on the company level, and move them into my staff operations officers. And they were able, since they were active duty officers, we were able to fold them in. And they knew my officers already because they'd been working with them in the reserve level already. So this worked out extremely well. We got our guys together. We deployed initially to 29 Palms, California, and we spent approximately just under 30 days there, going through intensive training, live fire exercises, working with aircraft, working with our communications, making sure everybody was on board and all of our equipment was done. We went through a huge series of medical testing, dental and medical, to make sure everybody was fit. We did long training exercises, over iterations, marches, overnights, um, uh, thing. And when we finally got the word that there was a lot going on during the time, and we'd get the word that we were going to ship out, then we weren't stand down, and we are going to ship out and stand down, ship out, we're going to stand down. It's quite hectic. But finally, we got the word that we were going to ship out. We were prepared. We already had our gear staged. We were loaded within 2 days and on a flight out to Kuwait, where we landed, and we spent a week in Kuwait, uh, acclimatizing to the desert, getting our gear ready because we had to send some gear by ship. We got it from the port. We moved it all together, put it together, and then we waited there for our word to go in. After a week, we got our word to go in. Most people remember the day the statue fell in Baghdad. That was the day that we went into Iraq. I sent my rolling stock, my trucks, Jeeps, Humvees, that on a flying column to meet up with Task Force Tarawa, and they had just entered into Al Qut in Wasit province, and then we scheduled the rest of our Marines to fly in with C-130s. Task Force Tarawa had captured an Iraqi Air Force base outside of Al Qut, and we were going to fly into there. I sent my column forward, and then I started moving my Marines forward. I will tell you, there was one incident. We were getting on the bus while we were in the camp in Kuwait to go to the airfield to get on the C-130s. I was on the first bus with my sergeant major, and a Marine comes. We had just closed the door to ride the bus to the airfield, and a Marine comes running up and it said, Colonel, Staff Sergeant so-and-so shot himself. I said, holy crap, I got a suicide right off the back of my thing. And so we stopped. I jumped out. Well, goofy idiot playing around with his pistol shot himself in his leg. And amazingly enough, this individual, this staff sergeant, was a policeman in civilian life. So it's not like he was unfamiliar with pistols or whatever, but being an idiot, and there are more than a few idiots in the Marine Corps. Sometimes I count myself as one of those. But I mean, I just told you my burden. I was worried about the health and welfare, and all was, immediately the first thing that went through my head, somebody committed suicide right off the bat before going into combat. Unfortunately, fortunately, he recovered and joined us later. Did have a little bit of a punishment for him after that, but
he must have got some ribbon for that. Yeah, he must have.
not a little bit, I could tell you. So that was my entry into our entry into Iraq.
So all your training, as you've talked about, is about war fighting. That's a Marine's job. Is to take the beach, assault the beach, take the beach, control the beach, and then let the army through. I guess, if I'm being very simplistic. And I guess you were obviously expecting, shall we say, a war fighting role, as were your Marines. It didn't quite pan out like that, did it?
Yeah, when I first realized I was going to, some people may not like this, but I was going to war. I was taking the garbage out at the end of my driveway to the street, and I was walking back that night back to the house, and I looked up and I looked at the constellation Orion, and I had taken this in my travels around the world in my Desert Storm, as well as other training I had done, schools and things, that I could always look up at Orion and think that I was standing in my own yard and have a sense of home. And I was walking back to the house and I looked up at Orion, and God spoke to me, and I heard him plain as day, like you and I are talking. He said, "You're right where I want you to be." And egotistical Marine that I am, I'm going, yes, flags flying, hit the beach, take the hill, assault the village or the enemy line, leading my Marines into combat. And that's what I was thinking. And that's what my thing. My whole period of time to that point in the Marine Corps was studying warfare and battle and how to conduct battle and combat, to conduct it and win. That was it was war fighting. That's what I studied from the Cold War, the Soviet tactics in the transition with Desert Storm into desert warfare, land warfare. That's what I had studied. That was what I think. So I told you I was on the first plane out to land into Al-Quds, and I got off the plane, and Colonel Johnson, who was the operations officer for Task Force Tarawa, he's coming out of the headquarters element for Task Force Tarawa, and he meets me at a few hundred yards off the plane. He says, Joe Natonski wants to see you. Joe Natonski was the commanding officer for Task Force Tarawa, wants to see you right away. And I said, okay. So I'm walking over there, and Joe Natonski, he starts walking out of the headquarters and he walks toward me. Joe Natonski's a imposing individual, about 6'5", tall guy, very thin, huge hawk nose, towered over me. And he walked up to me and he says, Colonel Couvillon, we're glad to see you. And I immediately thought something was wrong right there, because he pronounced my name correctly the first time he saw me, and not many people do that. I said, yes, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Couvillon, I'm here with 990 Marines and sailors ready to kick ass, take names. Where do you want us? What do you want us to do? And he says, glad you're here. You're the governor. I said, sir? He says, you're the governor. I said, okay, sir, what does that mean? He says, anything that happens in this province, you're responsible for. And I said, okay, sir, what does that mean? He says, anything that happens in this province, you're responsible for. I said, okay, sir, I got that. But what does that mean? What do you want me to do? Now, in the Marine Corps and in U.S. military, you get orders. You generally get written orders, or even if you get verbal orders, they tell you what you want, what they want you to do, who you're going to get to do it with, what weapons and people you're going to get to do it with, what your logistics are going to be, what your communications is, and what they expect to happen when you accomplish the mission. I didn't get any of that. You're the governor. Whatever happens in this province, you're responsible for. We're going to do a battle handover with Task Force Tarawa, which had about 6,000 Marines and sailors and some Army units with it. And I was going to transition my battalion into the space that Task Force Tarawa was occupying, which was the province of Wasit, west of Baghdad, and it went from the outskirts of Baghdad to the border with Iran. About the size of Connecticut, had 1.5 million people in it. One major city, 2 other fairly large cities in there, but mostly a rural agricultural area with about 230, 250 kilometers of the Iran-Iraq border. That has seen heavy fighting during the Iran-Iraq war. And that was it. That was my guidance. We did a battle turnover. We did some I put my guys with ride-alongs with the Task Force Tarawa units, and about a week and a half later, maybe 10 days, they pulled out.
David, describe to me what it was like when you had to brief your senior team that you ain't going to be taking no hills, as it were.
Well, there still was some combat going on. They had some Republican Guard units floating around. There were still some Iraqi Army units.
Yeah, but you've been told you're going to be governor, and now obviously they've got to help you.
Yeah, and there was a civil affairs unit there, but I was still responsible for the safety. They call it Safety and Security Operation, SASO. And so I was responsible for the security as well, not just the province. We had to address the enemy in the area, as well as what we were going to do with the civilian side and how we were going to bring. I don't know what to tell you at this point. I told my Marines before we even left 29 Palms, that we were not going there as conquerors. We were going there to provide the Iraqi people with an opportunity to experience their own level of freedom, democracy if they want it. But Iraq is for Iraqis. We're going to give them an opportunity. We're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein. We're going to give them an opportunity to determine their own way of life and how they're going to do that. And I made that very clear to my Marines, and I tried to inculcate that with them. So I knew at some point we were going to be interacting with Iraqis, because even when Desert Storm, we interacted with Arabs and Kuwaitis, Saudis, and other people living in the area. I'd experienced some of that already. But yeah, it was a change on a dime kind of thing. What are we going to do? I got my staff together, and I said, what are our priorities? What do we need to do? Well, first we needed security. We needed to get rid of any of the bad guys, Iraqi army units that were operating in the area. We were already being infiltrated with terrorists from Iran. There were before we got there, Saddam Hussein had opened up all of the jails, so all of the criminals were running loose through the area. It was chaos throughout. There was no power. Food distribution was non-existent. Propane, which was how they cooked their food for gas, benzene was not benzene was gasoline. Propane was not available. The civilian, all of the government agencies for the Iraq government had disappeared. The leaders had gone. The tribal leaders were trying to usurp their power where they could, what they could. The only government agency that stayed in place were the firemen. The fire department stayed what they're doing, and the firemen in Iraq were also the bomb disposal units in Iraq. And these guys, it was kind of amazing. They had screwdrivers and needle nose pliers, and that's how they were defusing bombs. And in their robes and flip flops, some amazing guys. I saw them going to burning buildings dressed like that too to put out fires. They were the only ones that pretty much stayed in place. So we had no government infrastructure left. The civil affairs unit that was there with Task Force Tower stayed with me for another few weeks. They were trying to reinstitute some government programs and put things together. We had a very capable individuals that were running that operation and putting some things together. I was not trained in civil affairs, but when I got my Marines together, my staff, I recognized that we needed security, we needed food distribution, we needed electrical things, we need to support the jails, the police force. We need to recreate a police force. We needed to recreate government agencies. We needed to get people back to work, put them back together, make sure that they knew we were operating and we were in charge. And as I said, as reservists in my battalion, I had lawyers, I had policemen, I had electricians, I had engineers, I had civil engineers, I had mechanical engineers, I had carpenters, I had plumbers, I had students who were studying this kind of stuff in universities as well. So I took it upon myself that we were going to reinstitute this government. We created, and I put capable people in charge. One of my warrant officers, when I spoke about in my book, Warrant Officer Green, Chief Warrant Officer Green, had been the training officer for the Louisiana State Police Training Academy. Okay, Warren, you're going to start our new police force, man. Put a training academy together, hire policemen, and we're gonna make a new police force. I had a capable lawyer, Sean Dunn, who I had known as when he was a sergeant, and he had gotten a commission, and he was back as a platoon commander for me. I put him in charge. Well, we're going to recreate the judicial system. Let's put it back together. Let's fix the jails. Let's put get the judges back in place. Get the courts back open again. We're going to put that back together, and I put him in charge to do that. I had another capable officer who had happened to be an active duty officer. I said, we need security services for hospitals, for the banks, for the government offices. Let's make a security, um, not a police, not an army, but a security company, a government security company to protect these places. And I put him in charge of hiring these guys and training them to be security officers. I had my medical staff start working with the hospitals. We needed to reopen the hospitals. We needed to open clinics. We needed to put people out and treat the people in the neighborhood. Again, all of these are reservists. By the way, my battalion surgeon was he was the chief surgeon at Vanderbilt University, a very capable guy, Captain Nadu. So I found people. I even had one guy who was he had worked in an electrical power plant. Okay, go see where the power transition teams and make this sucker work again. What are we going to do? I found people who had the capability to do it. And in the meantime, my infantry guys put them to work, patrolling the streets, doing the initial security work, helping with the distribution of food and propane and gasoline distribution, cleaning up the streets. Literally, the place was trash. There were unexploded ordnance, ammunition all over the place. It was things that needed to be taken care of. The schools were used as ammunition dumps. That was another thing we were doing. I had some CBs next to me. Let's rebuild the schools. Let's put them back together. Let's start the school system back up. Let's get kids back in the schools. If you have idle young men hanging around the streets, all they do is get into trouble. Put the teachers back to work. Try to get people back to work. Give them a job. Get them functioning as a society again. And I talked about the mindset of the reservists to be able to do things outside the box of what we think. So it wasn't just necessarily smash, kill, maim, destroy. We were actually going to have to do some rebuilding within society and to make sure that my Marines were on board with that. Did we have incidents? Absolutely. There were bad guys out there. They were fomenting things. We had protests. We had, people still shooting at us. It came to be quite a bit of organized chaos for quite a while.
David, could you just tell me a little bit about your approach? Because you didn't sit in your ivory tower, really, did you? And just like issue orders. You chose a very deliberate path, didn't you?
I did. I mentioned that I was in Desert Storm before, and I had an opportunity to talk with a lot of Arabs, Islamic, Muslims, and I developed a thought that when I was talking to those people during Desert Storm, that the average person over there, he wanted to have a job, to be able to support his family. He wanted his kids to have a better life than he had, and he wanted to get along, which is no different than what I wanted in my life and what most Americans, most men that I know or have ever talked about as a general population felt the same way. So I felt the thing. I mentioned I went to a seminary, Catholic seminary, for a while. Yes, I hold my religion, to heart. But I took it upon myself to read the Quran at that point. I wanted to understand what they were looking at, how they were looking at. And I also noticed there was a difference between the average Arab in the city or in the urban area and the Bedouins in the in the desert area on a thing, and most of the things that people think are bad about Islam come from the Bedouin culture. That the females covering their face in the water. Excuse me. I should have turned that off earlier.
Not to worry.
Uh, but I took it upon myself to engage with them. And like I told you before, I didn't expect to go there as a conqueror. I went there to provide them with another life. So I decided that I was going to use my commanding officers and my staff. My executive officer was fabulous on this, Major Scott Garris. I pretty much left him in charge of the military side of things, and I tried to work on the civilian side to try to rebuild the government and to work with them. I walked through the streets. I talked to people. I got what they, what are you interested in? Why, or what do you want to have happen? What are you looking for? Here's how we're gonna set up a government. So I set up, and I had the civil affairs guys working with me on this. We set up a provincial government to start with, and then we set up city governments or town governments, and then district governments in each of the different in the areas. And we tried to put people. I got people. Now we didn't have elections initially, but I identified the different groups that were there. I tried to. I helped form political parties. Everybody wanted to be involved in the process. They were so excited to be a democracy. They wanted to vote. I had three of the greatest questions I had access is, can you get me a picture of George Bush? Can you get me an American flag? And when do we get to vote? And that was when did we do that? How could we do it? When did we get to it? They were excited to participate. So I tried to do political parties. So all of the organizations, they had labor unions, they had military organization, officers organization, retired organizations. They even had some religious organizations, different schisms in the community, the merchants, the tribes. So for the provincial government, I said each organization could have one representative on the council, just one, and send a name to me. We will vet them, and we did. We vetted them against Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party, and then I had them on the council, and I had the council elect a leader. We identified an old judge, a retired judge who had been exiled by Saddam Hussein not out of the country, but exiled to the countryside, to the desert, who was very well respected by the Iraqis, and I named him the interim governor. So I was the military provincial governor, but he was the Iraqi governor, and he and I worked closely together. If something went wrong on the Iraqi side, I went to him, and I put it to him to do the thing. If it was on the military side or against the Americans, it came to me and to my staff. And then I had the provincial council work with the governor about what priorities they needed to address and what they needed to do. And I literally had to teach them how to hold a meeting, because in the previous day during Saddam Hussein, if they had a meeting, it was whoever was a strong man in there told them what to do, and everybody nodded their head and went thing. Otherwise, if you didn't, they might disappear that night and never be seen again. I had to teach them how to vote, how to do a secret ballot, how to have a discussion, to make a proposal, have a discussion, and have a vote on it. And people were deathly afraid to step out. Saddam Hussein had killed the initiative, the innovation, the action out of these people. These people were terrified. They were pretty skeptical about us when we first came on board. It took me a while to gain their trust, and to get them working toward a cohesive program that they could build on themselves, so that we could work toward a democracy, or at least they could have a vote and everything. I went around and I talked to people. I established 2 newspapers, 2 television stations, and 2 radio stations. I gave them freedom of speech, whatever you want. And they had some very vilifying things about us and against us. But on the other hand, I also went on the television twice a week and radio twice a week. I held call-in shows, much like you're doing with me, and had anybody that wanted to call and ask a question, and I would try to answer their question. Same thing on the television show. They would call in. What do you want to do? They interview me. Um, Trying to make sure that we had the trust in it, and that they had a buy-in to what we were doing to try to have Iraq for Iraqis. I walked the streets. I tried to do it. I told my Marines, uh, I told my Marines, you look on the cover of the book, I have a mustache. One of the things I learned during Desert Storm was that if you're an Arab and you don't have any facial hair, you're not wise enough. You have no gravitas. You have no age on you to be able to be worthwhile being heard. So I asked my Marines to grow mustaches within the Marine Corps regulations. About 80% of them did. It paid dividends. I told my Marines not to wear sunglasses when you talk to them. Take your glasses off and look them in the eye. Talk to them. Don't talk down to them. Have them. I told my Marines, a Marine in full battle gear, helmet, flak jacket, weapon, all his ammunition, pack and all is a pretty imposing thing. I said, walk on your patrols, take your helmets off. I told them they could take their helmets off if they want on my patrol. Talk to the kids, carry colored books, games, balloons, whatever. Talk to the kids. If their parents see my Marines being good to their kids, if a parent sees somebody being good to their kids, they're generally going to soften their stance on this part. It worked. It worked. I mean, I tried hard. My days were long. I was up at 5 a.m, out into the population. I'd get home, but I'd get back to the base maybe 11:30 at night. Have a chance to meet with my staff. Maybe get a cigar and a shower. Hit the bed by 2 o'clock in the morning, and 5 o'clock I'm up at it again. It was just the way they did. I wanted those people to understand we were there to help, and that's what we were trying to do.
David, I commend that. And I just wanted to, we've had a couple of comments come in, and Paddy said he's read the Quran a couple of times, each time in theatre. Is quite instructive, and he's glad that you read it.
Oh, thank you.
I gained a lot.
I gained a lot. I was able to use some of the passages in the Quran because one of the things Arabs are famous for is rhetoric. Everything is over the top. I mean, if you have a fender bender, it's like an 18-wheeler full of gasoline blew up your car, and that's how they talk. Thing. But I did have quite a few run-ins with religious zealots, sheikhs, and such, who we were Christian, or at least Western, and not Islamic. Though I did have some Muslims in my battalion, but I was able to have a discussion with them, and I was trying to make a point. I would use some portions of the Quran to make that point, and they were, it was kind of hard for them to come back at that. I made a particular one of the things I really tried to do was bring women into the process, and I used the book of Maryam in the Quran. Maryam is really the only female mentioned in the Quran, the mother of Isu, Jesus, and I used her example in the Quran to be inclusive of women in process of rebuilding the society and the government and the province.
I think that's showing great cultural awareness. I think that's to be commended. I'm just very mindful of the time, David, and I've got a funny feeling I could talk with you with another couple of hours. But there's a couple of other things I wanted to talk to you about because, and I don't necessarily think we need to go into all the stuff that's in your book because you want people to buy this book. You don't want to give it all away, so keep your powder dry, as they say. But obviously, when you were in Iraq, I think it's fair to say policy changed, didn't it? When Bremner and the Coalition Provisional Authority, if I've got that right, came into being. So, and that caused you quite a dilemma, didn't it? And I think also not just a sort of practical dilemma, but also a bit of a personal dilemma, I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely.
So if you could, sorry, you might just want to, sorry, I should ask you to explain the Provisional Authority and who Bremner is as well for our audience's benefit, please.
Originally Orha, and forget what the acronym stands for right now, was in charge of the aftermath of the war and try to build. But the war was so coalesced and very short that they didn't have time to get their thing. And President Bush created the coalition provisional authority and put Ambassador Bremer in charge, and to rebuild the country, or to bring the country together. Now, this was probably a month and a half, maybe 2 months into my tenure there, so I was already on the move, trying to do things. Remember, I told you that everybody wanted to vote already. When are we going to have elections? When we're going to have elections? I was putting together political parties, and they were having discussions about how did they want Iraq to look like? How did they want their government to look like? The provisional authority became Baghdad centric, so everything had to go through Baghdad, through the CPA, and then down to the provinces, down to the towns and the thing. And after a while, things that had already put in place to try to do things, I would get an encyclical, an order from Baghdad that was almost 180 degrees from what I was trying to do. And I would have to tap dance around that to try to smooth it over with the local populace and whatever. And it got bad. The populace started telling me, well, if I got to go to Baghdad, what's the difference between that and Saddam? So we had to do, Saddam made us give everything to them. Everything had to go up to Baghdad and then come down. So I had no electrical generation in my province. I had an agricultural province. Agriculture in that area runs on water. The Tigris River ran right through the town. And pumps are essential for irrigating the desert for their crops. No electricity, no pumps, no water, no crops. Baghdad said, send all the electricity to Baghdad so that they could keep Baghdad open. Well, my people are asking, where's my electricity? And you have to understand, the Iraqis at this point, America is the greatest thing. They couldn't understand why they didn't have the lights or air conditioning or computers in their homes with 2 weeks after we got there. How come we don't have this yet? Where is it? Where is it going? It takes a while. I had several electrical relay stations from power generating plants in southern Iraq to Basra, and we were supposed to route that thing. I just told my guy, look, for 4 hours a day, route 40% of that power to the rest of to my province. I was told not to. I was given an order not to. I ignored it, and I gave my people some power because my God, it was hot. They needed their pumps, they needed their water, they needed some electricity, and they did get some things done. There were a million things that we really could have done to help out of that. But Baghdad, when are we going to get to vote? When are we going to get to vote? When are we going to get to vote? And then all of a sudden, Ambassador Bremer says, we will not have elections until we have national elections. Now, personally, being a student of American history, and no offense, the American Revolution was a grassroots revolution. Democracy starts from the ground up, not from the top down. And I have always seen how I've participated in politics in the United States and elsewhere to look at is the people are the power and comes from the ground up. You don't have a king or an Ambassador Bremer standing up there telling everybody what to do, or a Saddam Hussein telling everybody what to do on down the line. The power has to come up from the bottom. You build the base. You build the base first. You don't build the Eiffel Tower with the radio antenna on top before you build the concrete footings at the bottom. You build the base up. And that's what I was trying to do, was build the base up and go up to things. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to start from the top. And they were doing absolutely idiotic things. I'm trying to create jobs. For example, I was an agricultural thing, and we got an encyclical from Baghdad saying the Iraqi wheat does not meet UN standards. Burn the crops in the fields. What? If I burn the crops, The farmer doesn't get paid. The trucker who moves the harvesters don't get paid for harvesting. The truckers don't get paid for moving the wheat from the field to the mill. The mill don't get paid for milling the wheat. The truckers again don't get paid for moving the flour to the bakeries. The bakeries don't have flour to make bread or sell to the people. The people don't have bread. You just completely broke down the whole economic system. But you want me to create jobs. How do I create jobs when you undercut the economic system? I was absolutely livid with this. I jumped in the Humvee and I tried to call people on the phone or radio, going through the chain of command. Couldn't get anything. I finally went banging on doors trying to see Ambassador Bremer, told him how stupid this was. And I didn't get through. I did get through to somebody that was a functionary and was going, look, instead of burning the crops, how about sending some people out here and train them on what to do and how to make the wheat, meet standards? They've been growing wheat here for 4,000 years and eating the same bread. My God. All of a sudden they got to have standards and they can't do it. It was just silly ass crap like that you had to fight against. And that I'm not even going to say that was an extreme example. There were other examples that were just absolutely stupid. And I can't believe, and I'll point this out, and I made this point in my book. Americans are arrogant. We think that we know better than anybody else, and we're going to tell you what to do and how to do it. And you have to do it our way, or you don't. If you don't, you're stupid. And for one thing, if we go into another country, if I went into your house and I told you were stupid, you don't know what you're doing. I'm looking at your guitar in the background right there. You don't know what you're doing. You can't play like B.B. King. You're stupid. What are you going to do? You're just going to shut off. You're not interested in anything else I have to say. Instead of helping, we tried to tell them what to do. We didn't try to use their culture, their background, their knowledge. They had education. It just boggled the mind that we tried to do this on a thing. And I can say honestly, in my opinion, coming back home and watching what happened in the aftermath in Iraq, we brought a lot of this stuff on ourselves because we would not trust the Iraqis. The terrorists, the Islamists stole a march on us with cassette tapes. They passed cassette tapes out to everybody, telling them how bad they were, how bad we were, and what they were going to do and why they should resist us. And that's how we got to the position that we're in there. That ended up in Fallujah and other areas, even on into Syria later in the 2010s.
Yeah, I did like that comment about making their own bread for 4,000 years. They probably ought to know what they're doing by that point, really.
Yeah, a little bit.
So we have actually run out of time, but I have got a couple of other things, I would just like to talk about.
I try to keep I know I run on.
Briefly, David, please, but you're very interesting to listen to. So please, because there's just so much that I'd like to talk about, but there's a couple of points I want to talk about. And I think you've obviously talked about basically there is change in policy, which obviously wasn't working for the general populace, certainly where you were and probably across the country. But I think also this idea, and we see this a lot, I think, in the armed forces, where a unit rotates out, and you talk about this in your book, where a unit, the Marines, rotate out, and the new units come in, which happen to be Ukrainians and Poles in this particular instance. And it's almost like it's just a reset from that point onwards, and then everything changes. So whatever you had done, I wouldn't say it was undone, but it was certainly going to be done in a very different way. How much of that do you think? How much of that kind of rotation and lack of policy, if you like, across rotation strategy?
It is very frustrating. Matter of fact, when we were deployed there, I expected to be there for 2 years. I fully believe that, and I thought it would have paid a lot more dividends if we would, because once you become inculcated into the culture and a thing, and you get into a rotation or a system of what you're doing and how you're doing it, you making friends or at least cooperations with things. And when you rotate somebody else, they've got to rebuild all that trust back up. There's nobody there. There's not a continuity that happens to that. I'm a fan of the old British regimental system where a military man joins a regiment and he's there for the rest of his life. I mean, that's his whole military career. He might go out for a couple of them, but he's always going to come back to his regiment. Uh, to that point, and builds a familiarity and a continuity with the people. Again, like any kind of like a sports team, people work together, and when they know each other and what they're doing, you build that trust, and you can build things. Rome wasn't built in a day, and they certainly didn't rotate it out all the time either.
Don't imagine the legions were rotated every 6 months, were they? I'll be surprised. Anyway, so just one final point, one final question, really. You talk about at the end of your book, you start to talk where you definitely talk about, I guess, the consequences of war for some when people have been on operational deployments, been in combat, and how we look after those young men. And, what's your bit involvement with that, and what are your thoughts on how I say we, I'm talking about, I guess, the Western world when I say that, or particularly in the US, how you look after soldiers and they've returned from combat?
I know the United States has tried to address it like a decompression time. One of the things in the past wars, certainly before Vietnam, even to a lesser extent Korea, but certainly World War II, when a soldier came back, they got on a ship, at least in the United States, they got on a ship and they were on ship for 3, maybe 4 weeks. They were with their buddies. They were having a decompression time. They were able to discuss things out with each other and everything. Now with an airplane, my God, you come out of the field, you get on the airplane, you come home and you take your shower back at the base in the United States. You're completely walled off. And then you're dispersed to new units, or as a reservist, you go home. You don't see your buddies on a day-to-day basis anymore. There's a breakdown of the opportunity to for your mind and body to reset itself to where it should be and who you are and what you think. Unfortunately, I've lost about 8 of my people. I didn't lose any of my Marines and sailors while I was there. I had some wounded, but nobody died. Unfortunately, I've lost 8 since then to suicide, and that sucks rocks. And I beat myself up about it. Damn, call me, call somebody, talk to somebody. I try to work as much as I can. I try to stay, Facebook and social media is a great thing. I try to stay in touch with as many of my Marines as I can. The book is a wonderful thing. Many of them have heard it's come out, and they've contacted me. We're going to order a book, Colonel, and how you doing, whatever. It's wonderful to hear from everybody. But that's a thing that we have to think, and I don't want people to pity the soldier, sailor, airman, Marine that's coming back. He doesn't need your pity. He needs your understanding. He needs your understanding that he went through things and he has things that preys on his mind, that he goes to sleep with, that he wakes up with in the morning, that he has to learn to live with. And that the people that he went through it with, some of them are dead. Some of them are not even around. They've disappeared. They don't know where they are. And some of them don't want to talk about it, and they withhold to themselves. Psychiatric treatment or therapy is that's a manly thing that many of us think that it shouldn't. I'm strong enough that I can do without it. I still go to a therapist. I still see people. I still talk to my comrades when I can. I'm not afraid of it. There are some things I don't go there with, I box them up, but there's sometimes it escapes. But it's something that the government, and more than the government, neighbors, family, friends need to understand and reach out and help and allow that person to talk. And all you need to do is listen, and don't judge. Don't go back and spread rumors after the fact or whatever. Be an understanding, be caring, and help them when they ask for help.
I completely agree with that. And thank you for saying that, David. I really appreciate that. That really is the end of our time. So I highly recommend your book to everybody to read, because there's a lot more, obviously, and it's well worth a read. Just to say thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I might have to do a longer form one for you next time so we can talk some more. But let's stay in touch, please. I'd love to stay in
Absolutely.
touch.
I don't have so many friends. I can't afford to lose one. Now,
Even if you
friend,
did lose the War of the Revolution. Thank you so much. Cheerio.